or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none,
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
we have a motion to approve. We need a roll call, or can we just? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. All right. Number 5, regular business. Leslie, you're going to start this out?
Well, I certainly can. So tonight, we have Bruce Schwartzman from BKV Group to walk us through the assessment of the J.C. Penney site, along with the community center site, and also then a proposed joint site with the Willmar Utilities. And he'll have various layouts of that design and give you some insight onto also procurement process and cost estimates. So Bruce, if you'd like to start.
Good evening, Council. Good to see you all. So you've had so much information in front of you, oh, shoot, what's it been? Well over a year now, going through a number of things, maybe even 2 years at this point. And ours is not to tell you one way or the other. Ours is hopefully to give you some information and let you all make the decisions that are tough for your community. You know, not just the community center, but for the city hall. And some of the decisions that really you'll be looked at some point in time is, where should these buildings be? What kind of budget do you feel is appropriate, and how do you get there potentially, knowing that the range of the numbers, and potentially the procurement method that you go through. And those are some of the big picture topics to discuss tonight. So I think with that, it is a workshop. We invite any questions as we're going through it. Our function, I'm here with Paul Michelle as well from our company. Paul and I are here to answer any questions you have as we go through it. With that, and hopefully I'm in the microphone. So as Leslie started to talk about, the summary of what we have tonight is the space program, and talk a little bit about that and what that entailed, the concept plans that we talked about, a potential schedule for implementing the projects, soft cost breakdown. The mayor had a question at one of the last council meetings, what's in soft cost? So while we didn't define every line item, the cost of every line item, this helps to give an overview of what's considered in soft cost. We did some cost estimates, and again, in a study, nobody's bidding on a project. You don't know the type of carpet. You don't know how many light fixtures you're going to have. You don't know how many bathrooms. You don't have all the detail that goes into a project. So you know generally, based on square footage, how much or at least we do. Having done community centers and city halls, we know what these facilities cost and run. So we did cost estimates. Again, we talked about a method of procurement, how you were to move ahead with some of these projects, and then a summary at the end of this. So it's been probably a year, 8 months or so ago, maybe sometime in the winter, actually, when we met with all the various departments. On the city hall side, we met with admin, and we met with the mayor at that point in time, and one of the other council individuals. We met human resources. All the various departments are in the city. And we went through, and what we do when we do a space program was we send out a questionnaire talking about their jobs, the spaces they use, the types of space they have, types of files they need, how much file system. And that rolls together in a spreadsheet to tell us some information. We look at it based on a 20-year long-term growth. We look at 5-year increments. And the question is, your staffing. Is the staffing changing or adding, depleting, or decreasing staffing? And what kind of spaces are you in now? What kind of spaces do you need to do your job? Now, having done a lot of city halls, well over 80, we challenge some of the departments a lot of times. We say, do you really need an office? In our office in Minneapolis, we have over 100 people, and we have 2 offices in the entire space. The rest, everybody else is in workstations. You have the HR and the finance director. So you have finance, so you have confidentiality with the HR, and they have the finance. So you have, everybody else is open workstations. So again, from what we've done with other cities, we never say this is how you should do it, but we want to make sure that people's titles and what they do is appropriate for the spaces they need. So anyway, we do that. And this gives you a little idea of, through the questionnaires, through the interviews. Once we get the questionnaires back, we sit down with each department head, and we go through the space program and we go through the questionnaire to identify the space they have now and what they might need in 20 years. So what we came up with, to not belabor the issue too much, and you can see how it's broken down. This is a summary chart. That shows the 14,000 subtotal. Then you add to that building support, which is miscellaneous lobbies, bathrooms, things like that. There is in the program some area to park city vehicles inside, so that was in that 10,000 square feet building support, and that's things like a break room and some file areas and things like that are in that as well. And then you add to the end, you see that 15% building factor. That's in the program, you take all the individual spaces and you add to it, that 15% adds for the exterior walls and stairwells and all the other things that make up the area. Now, when you do final planning, is it always this number? No. Sometimes you can create some efficiency, but this does give you a good ballpark for what a city hall with a city your size would run. Out of that 30,169, you currently have about 22,400. So right, so we're about 8,000 square feet higher than what you currently have. Of that, 4,000 square feet, like I mentioned, is garage space. And then right now, you don't have a council chamber in your current building either. So again, if you add that roughly 2,000 square feet or so for your council chamber. And I say this because when you take your 22,004 and you add some of those other things, it shows that you're only incrementally growing. So again, in my mind, and having done this for years, it's an appropriate amount. And again, so I made some calls, like, I called up Crystal and Golden Valley with New Hope, Columbia Heights, Lino Lakes, Forest Lake. All these are cities in Minnesota that are roughly around this 20 to 22,000 square foot, or 20 to 22,000 population. All of these facilities are anywhere from about 29,000 to 32,000 for their city hall. So again, it validates to us that what the program for the city hall is appropriate for that area. So that's the city hall portion of the program. On the community center piece, what we did is we sat down with Britta and we looked at what their programs were, and we talked about you guys have a phenomenal community center and what it provides the community. And I give Britta and the city a lot of kudos because it is not just focused on seniors anymore. It really is engaging the community as a whole, and it's got a lot of great resources. So currently you have a building that's about 16,174, I think is current. No, I'm sorry, wrong. 16,618 square feet is your current facility. What we're proposing in the program is about almost 28,000 square feet. And if you were to go through this information up there, you'd see that some of it is your Burlington Northern Room, which is the dining, kind of meeting, dancing area, things like that, grew by about 500 square feet in the ability to add more capacity. The salvage room, again, that's a dancing, large stage area, grew by almost 1,000 square feet. Again, the ability to have more events and things like this. And these are the things that were conveyed to us that, based on the expanding programs, what made sense. So if you go through, there's a number of line items. The woodworking shop grew by about 1,000 square feet. So there's some things in there that, at the end of the day, you might decide as a council, you know what, our budget's going to be this, and therefore you got to live with it and think about some expansions. But these were what the program were. And these were what based on your current usage, based on your expected usage, to accommodate some of those programs. So that was the community center piece. With the information of the programs, now we have an area. We have a footprint. Yes, ma'am.
Could I just ask you to go back to the department spaces? And you made a comment, and I've seen this in other buildings too, where not everybody has an office. The space that's laid out the way that when you met with the staff, are those offices?
It's a variety. It's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
It is. Most of the time, what we saw in most departments is the director of a division might have an office. Most people are in workstations.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd be glad to get more granular and follow up with the program on that too. So now that we have the areas and we understand how big these footprints need to be, then we can start testing the sites. So what we've come back with is a variety of things to talk about. One is, the existing community center site, and what will that site support as far as building area and how might that look? And again, these are conceptual. These are by no means a final plan. They're just to show, here's how much that block of space takes up on the site, here's how much parking it allows for, and here's how it might lay out. Again, not a final design in any sense. There's a lot of work to be done before you get to a final design. So we looked at the idea of the Willmar Utility Campus. Willmar Utilities, as most of you know, is looking at doing a new facility. The idea was, well, if it became a campus, how would that benefit the city? How would that benefit the utilities? And we've talked to them, and we've talked to individual Willmar Utility to see about that. The J.C. Penney site, what that might look like, and you've seen a variety of options on that. The downtown option, again, just to show all of you, if the downtown is a place where City Hall should be, what is that again? Where does that look like? And then one of the last ones that we had on there was one that was before COVID was talked about as the initial direction way back when, that the idea of the community center site would accommodate the City Hall as well as the community center. Again, we've heard a number of comments on that over the last months. So the first one is the community center. And you can see that kind of white bar in the very top off Highway 71, that's the existing facility. And then the L shape, what we're showing there is a new addition, right? Because we've identified that it's about 11,000 to 12,000 square feet short, meeting the program area. Again, at the end of the day, if the council says, look, we got to meet with the budget that's here, maybe some of those spaces are going to have to be future. There's some other things to accommodate that. That's a different budget discussion. But this shows the idea of making that, how do you accommodate that? Where might the front door be? The idea of phased construction, right? So again, I think we heard from the senior community, they can't be without, and they don't want to be, not can't be, but they don't want to be without their facility for some long duration. Well, this would allow the building of a new addition, the starting up of programs in that space, and allowing the existing to be remodeled. Because the cost estimate we had for this is not only the construction, that new blue box you see there, but also the remodeling existing. And when we see remodeling, and again, I'll get in the budget, it's new roof, it's new siding, it's new everything to bring that building up to a current code condition. We're showing the parking on that plan. I'm going to have to switch it on my screen to see where, sorry about this, because I can't read that small. So the existing, from a parking standpoint, the existing parking that we counted, I assume it's in general correct range, 106, 108
Yes.
spaces. And it looks like we're creating about 44 more, or no, 46 more. We've got 152 stalls now showing. And there's an idea, again, you know, could you develop that outdoor concept, an outdoor patio that ties that across to the garden, to the community garden, things like that. There's things that can be done to improve the site. So this is one concept in looking at how that building might sit on the site, and shows it can be accommodated on this site. This isn't the city hall, this is strictly community center. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, that doesn't include the city hall then?
No.
That would be constructing the community center only in the blue section then?
Nope.
Exactly. That's adding on to, so the existing
just
building is
adding
roughly
on.
that 16,000 square feet approximately.
Okay.
And the new building is roughly that 12,000 square
Okay.
feet more.
I don't believe we've seen the analysis of the structure of that building.
It's a steel frame metal building. You know, it's funny. Sometimes people ask, you know, how long is a building going to last? Any of us that's driven around the countryside and driven out in the farm areas any time in our life, last day, last two, whatever, we will see metal buildings that have been out there for 60 years. So while I haven't gone through and inspected the foundations and every little condition, my sense is a metal building, especially if we redo the skin, because there have been some leaks that have occurred in there, if we redo the skin, that building's going to last for another 50, 60 years easily. Yeah, the structure itself will last. The next option then looked at this idea of a campus. And there have been a few properties that have been discussed. Nothing's been finalized because it's still speculative. And when it's speculative on where to locate a project, you don't necessarily want to let the cat out of the bag because there's some property acquisition that needs to be had. And you really don't want to show your hand as to where you're potentially looking. So this showed the idea of a campus. Now, the Willmar utility facility, that big block in white, is about a 73,000 square foot block, if I remember correctly. It's a big facility. The blue that you see down kind of below the parking area, that's the city hall component, the city hall piece. So when you think about how they marry together, right, part of the question when you tie two operations together, it's how do they support each other? Well, the reality is Willmar Utilities is really a separate operation than the city hall. There could be some shared site development cost. There could be some shared site acquisition cost. There could be some shared, the space within the building, there's like a mechanical electrical room, a sprinkler room, there's some utility rooms that would go to serve both areas. It's an incremental savings, but there's a little bit of savings area. In talking to Willmar Utility and the gentlemen that handle the planning for that, they really do feel they're two separate operations. And in their opinion, they would rather have separate entrances and things like this. So while this could work, I'm not sure, to be quite candid, I'm not sure this bet is a big strength one way or the other. I don't think it really gains the city a lot. You're still paying for that new city hall construction. That's a new block. Again, is there some minor offsetting cost by sharing this? Maybe, but not a lot.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess in this plan, I don't see any of it, but a shared council chambers. It seems to me that a community our size doesn't really need 3 different buildings with council chambers in, or chambers in, and we've been using the one out at the county building, and we used to be here, and so to me, this was one way perhaps to not have shared space, not have shared operations, but to be able to have in the design a shared council chambers kind of thing, or shared with that.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that could happen. I think there's some public lobby spaces, some public restroom spaces, and the council chamber and some meeting spaces that could definitely be shared with the utility company. That's beyond us to negotiate that situation. You as a council can clearly make that a direction in a project like this. We didn't account for that in the cost estimate, but it would reduce some of that cost. I absolutely agree with you, because this is a space they use for their meetings, correct?
Yes.
I agree. Well, I have multiple, this space is only good for these larger meetings because of the dais and things that are set up in there. I think that makes absolute sense.
Thank you.
So then on the JCPenney site, I think with the JCPenney site, there's a couple strategies that are very, very important. One is we know that right now the building sits in a sea of parking. You drive up there, it's asphalt all the way around it. And it doesn't have the presence, I think, that you would want for your community buildings. It doesn't have that green space, and clearly from what we've heard in the programming and planning, the community garden is important to the individuals that come to the community center. So, you need that space. The retention area is actually off to the east. There's a large retention area that accommodates the whole site. So there's really not a lot of need for what's considered rain gardens or things like that on site. That would be something purely if the city were interested in. But there's that landscape area that we're identifying on the east side, right off Fifth. And the idea of buffering it, you can't do much, the drive lanes are going to be the drive lanes. On the south entrance there is currently where the marquee sign goes up and it says different stores are in the mall, and there's that entrance point there. But the idea is to soften the facility. Now, the loading dock is currently on the north side of the building, which to me would kind of make sense for the community center aspect, the wood shop, some of these things to be on that side of the building. We're showing an addition. Now, the reason we showed the addition, and again, what you're struggling with a little bit is you've been given some information about remodeling this building. Well, this building is 52,000 square feet. So one of the things you've been discussed is that idea of remodeling at 52,000 square feet. The way we're looking at it is we're saying, okay, if you add the community center of the 32,000, no, excuse me, I have them backwards. If you had the community center of the 28,000 square feet, and you add the city hall of the 30,000 square feet, correct? Now you're at about 58,000 square feet per the program. Not saying you couldn't squeeze things in, but all we're doing is going based on our program. So we're showing an addition on that southeast corner of JCPenney building because we're understanding and saying, okay, our program's generally correct. There needs to be an expansion of some set. At the end of the day, if the planning fits within that building, great. You don't need to add that. But right now, based on the program, to keep apples to apples from one comparison to another, we're showing that additional 6,000 square foot addition. So that's the concept of it. And when it comes to the parking of that one, I know that's been a big discussion. So on the north side, and so what's happened is, it's really hard to see in this. Hopefully you've got it all in your packets. On the north side, where we're kind of showing gray, and we've kind of hazed out the rest of the area, a little lighter tone or a little different tone, is where we understand the property line would be for the J.C. Penney piece. And based in that area, we're about, I think, about 74 spaces up in that northern section of what we see. If we were to do some landscape buffers, some islands, some paved areas, if we were to clean some things up and do a variety of things, about 74 spaces on the north side. Again, I think, as has been discussed before, if the city were to go there, having an agreement in place with the owner of the mall to allow for some of that overflow parking at special events, I think would make sense. On the south side, where we're seeing the city hall potentially being, it's a much larger area, and there's about 207 spaces there now. Of course, a lot of that is closer to one of the main entrances to the mall, so you're going to get some bleed over of people parking in that. But you could probably identify some areas in the middle or so that are important. So the way we see it is this could work. When it comes to how the building looks, we've done a lot of facilities that have been remodeled. Our Plymouth facility took an old city hall and wrapped the facade around it. Our Inver Grove Heights City Hall took an existing old building and added to it. Our Independence City Hall that we just recently did a year ago, again, took an older building and wrapped and provided a new facade. So I don't have a doubt at the end of the day we can make this look good and make this be what you need it to be. But there's some things just to be aware of. My biggest concern, and it can be handled on this particular one, is we've identified a dotted line. Gary, thanks for your assistance, but we don't know the exact location of the sanitary sewer line that runs under there. But what happened was, I can't show you on the site, but the block of the building that is the J.C. Penney block, that was added on after the mall was constructed. And some of you might know that, but the mall was built, and they ran their sanitary sewer line on that east side. When they went to build the J.C. Penney building, they built the building over top of that sanitary sewer line. That sanitary sewer line, like you all know, the building was built in the 80s, is now almost a 40-some-year-old type kind of line. It's not a question of when that line is going to fail, or not a question of if the line's going to fail, it's a question of when that line's going to fail. Not that it can't be accommodated, but if the line needs to wrap around the site with a lift station, all I'm saying is if the city were to go this way, you probably need to put something in an agreement with the owner of the mall that if and when this line should go bad, that needs to be addressed. And that's, Gary, am I representing where it is roughly correctly?
According to our records, that's what it shows.
Okay, thank you.
It's in the hallway. It's not in the building.
So is it further to the west? But it's in that kind of below where the loading dock is then?
It's further this way. So when you come into the entrance on the south side, it's in that vestibule.
Oh, so it wouldn't even be under the city area at all?
It's not on the-
Okay, then we misunderstood where it was. Okay.
It's not even under the loading dock area then? Because that entrance is equal with the loading dock.
Might be, it's close.
I'm sorry about that.
It would be close to the loading dock. It would not be underneath the building coming in from
Yep.
south entrance.
Just based on the information that I have at City Hall, just shows it, maybe it shows it well under the J.C. Penney's building. And this is just based on the information I have at City Hall. And it shows it right almost where the two buildings join, but a little bit more under the J.C. Penney site.
So,
And like I had said earlier, we talked about it a little bit, and I just said, there's options if that line would fail, that you could possibly line it, but we don't know what the future brings on something like that. So, I mean, it's not a practice that we incur anymore, okay? I know it's happened in other places. We've dealt with this on Eagle Lake and some stuff, but it's not a practice that we allow to happen any further. I mean, this situation is what it is, and it's been that way for a long time, but it's just something to be aware of, that's all.
there is a space between the Herberger's Home Store and J.C. Penney building. So there is about 15 to 20 feet in between to where customers walk in. So that's where that line is in that area.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's not it's more about making sure that if the city goes in this direction, you have something in writing. Because I'm assuming that, Gary, that serves the mall, correct?
Yeah, so according to our records, that line starts on the south end of south end of the mall. There's what we call a dead-end manhole that picks up sewer there, then it flows north, And the city main runs around the north side of the, comes from the west, traveling east, and it runs around the north side of the mall. And this line dumps into that city line. I want to say I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's someplace up on the north end of that parking lot someplace. And that's just based on the records that we have. Those aren't shop drawings, they're just sewer maps that we go by that are pretty accurate. And so that's just based on what we have.
Okay, I'm saying maybe towards where the loading dock is, but not at the JCPenney site. It's,
Yeah, all I know is that according to the drawings I have, it must have been the original line when the mall was built before they added on to the mall. That's the way it looks, according to the plans that we have in the office there, so.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to show anybody that wanted to see it too, it may be, usually I haven't found them to be wrong, but I would certainly share that information with anybody that would be interested in it.
And again, I don't think it's our reason why you would discount this potential property altogether. It's just something to be aware of, and whatever agreement you go into, you just want to be mindful that this should not be the city's responsibility, no matter where it's located. If you go this direction, somebody else should incur the cost of having to deal with the line in the future. That really is my only point with that. The other one, that we brought back, an oldie, but still a goodie, is really the potential of building downtown. And, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, one of the questions is always, where do you want the city hall to be? I mean, when we did Fridley's City Hall years ago, they had no town center, they had no center area, and they wanted to create an identity that people knew where the downtown or where the city was, where the city facility was. Is this the end-all, be-all of location? I'm not sure. It's downtown. Is there a benefit, an economic benefit for a city hall to be downtown? Potentially. You're feeding some of the restaurants, you're feeding some of the businesses, you're doing some of that downtown. We know that this site here shows the auditorium, and it shows the potential of buying Hardware Hank, tearing down the auditorium, and building a new city hall facility. Now, I don't think it's in the right location. I would put it up where the auditorium is, further to the north, because then what you could do is you could tear down the auditorium, build your city hall, and then you tear down the existing city hall. This is the most expensive option, though, because you have to buy Hardware Hank, and because you have to demolish the building, which the question with the auditorium is what's historic, what do you have to preserve, what's the State Historic Preservation Office going to make us handle. But there's some monkeying around. But it's an option that keeps it downtown. The Block 50 keeps it downtown too. But again, at the end of the day, it's location, cost, and just how do you want to proceed with it. The other one too that we had looked at way back when was this entire campus on the community center sites off on Highway 71. Looking at the idea of really building a new, kind of state-of-the-art, if you will, two-story city hall, community center, kind of combined in one. We've seen some of those where they really, like Shoreview up in the cities, it's a city hall community center, and they kind of feed off each other. There's certain energies that go on there. The groups work there. There's information that can be shared back and forth that works really well. This was a really early concept we showed. The community garden could be off to the east and redeveloped, or the community garden could go further to the south, where we kind of showed it in that one area. I think we had this at 192 spaces, the way it was kind of laid out. But again, this comes with some pain. I mean, one of the concerns that we heard at one of the council meetings was, what happens for that year and a half or almost 2 years while you're building on this site? Where do the seniors, where do the community center is? And that's one of the downfalls. That's one of the cons of this option is you're basically tearing down the existing and you're building new. At the end of the day, you could have a very nice facility, but for that year and a half to 2 year period, it's without a facility. From a schedule standpoint, they're all going to be relatively very, very similar. We're showing a schedule the way we as architects and we as designers and planners would do it. That we're allowing 2 months for what we consider schematic design. Schematic design is where we work with, just to be clear with the way our process works, It's where we work hand in hand with the city and the city staff and the community center. And what we do is we go back through that program and say, okay, you absolutely need this. And then we do a concept plan, and we work through the concept plan to see how you can create efficiency of the plan and the flow. And then we start and look at the exterior, and we develop elevations. So that schematic phase is floor plan, site plan, and exterior design. And then we come back with a cost estimate. Now, right now, what we're dealing with is a very high-level cost estimate. Once you hit schematic design, we've zeroed in on what this facility should cost, and we're honed in on exact numbers. We bring that back to council. Then once council approves the schematic design, you go to design development, and that's really when you put a lot more detail in. Where are the outlets? Where are the lights? What kind of lights are we using? What are the council chamber lights like? Do they work there for video and all the other things? Tying in AV systems, security systems. Anyway, a lot of things that go into the design development phase. Again, coming back to council with budget, estimate, we're on track, here's where things are, and a presentation. Once you go through design development, it's the construction documents. It's finalizing construction documents, making sure that you've got a good, tight set of documents for bidding and construction. That's another couple months. And then again, you bring it back to council for approval to issue the project for bid, because we're assuming this is a standard design, bid, build type process, type procurement. You allow it for a bidding process, roughly 6 weeks or so, 6 to 7 weeks for bid and award. And then depending upon the size of the project and what you do, right? So if you were to say, oh, you know, we don't care about the price, the auditorium's the site to go at, that's a much longer process. Because not only do the procurement of the building, you could probably wrap that into it, but you're gonna have to demolish that building, which could be 3 months or so, demolishing, clearing that site. It could be a building of this size, say it's just City Hall. It's roughly anywhere from 12 to 14 months construction. And you'll have a move, and then you demolish the existing City Hall and you finish the paving and things like that. So a project like that, easily a year, probably pushing on 2 years for that entire schedule for design and construction. If you go with the remodeling of the J.C. Penney building and you're not building the shell, so you're cutting holes in it for the windows, you're cutting into those 8-inch precast walls to get windows in there, but you're not building the steel frame and the steel structure, you're a shorter construction period. So the design piece should be the same. You should go through the detail of the design and make sure at the end of the day, this facility is going to be what you want, not just the day it's finished, for the next 20 years. And that's an important process to go through. But that construction period will be less because basically you're remodeling the inside. You might be doing some things, maybe a small addition, but that'll be a much quicker process. So anyway, this is a schedule. What we try to do, a lot of this is, when you look at where construction's happening, this is kind of hitting in that early spring of 2024, in starting construction May. That's more important if you're building a new building. Getting the foundation in the ground, getting the building starting up. If you're working with an existing building, it's not as critical. You probably could let that float into the winter or whatever and do it like that. But the biggest thing to think about with schedule is for every year that continues to go by, you're looking at about 5 to 6% per year inflation impact. It's a lot better than it was right after the pandemic. Right after the pandemic, there were some articles that hit the construction news that showed we had a 20% spike in construction, which has made it a little bit crazy where it is today. But things from a material standpoint, matter of fact, we just had a project bid for Rosemont, new police public works facility, and came in out of about a $48 million project, came in about $3 million under. So we are starting to see where projects are being bid more competitively, which I think is important for the city to consider bidding a project. So that's general overall schedule and how that would roll out. On the soft cost piece, like the mayor, because, you've seen some blanket numbers, there have been like, 20% or whatever it is, 2 million, 2.5 million. What does that mean? So these are the things that are in soft cost. So at a high level master planning study, you assign a percentage for what we consider soft cost. And the bigger the project, a lot of times that percentage might go down some. But typically, historically, 20% is a good rule of thumb. It's your money. It's the city's money. You don't really want to use it unless you need to, but it's to allocate it for the things that are not in construction. There's an analogy once that said, if you took a building and shook it upside down, everything that kind of falls out is soft cost. Well, that's true to some extent because it's furniture. So Land acquisition costs, if any land acquisition costs, that's not a construction cost, that's outside of construction costs. Professional service fees, the architectural engineering fees, those are separate. Building commissioning, typically on government facilities, and almost every one we see in Minnesota, we're having commissioning done. And commissioning is where you hire, and it's typically about 15,000 plus or minus 20,000, to have an independent engineering firm do an evaluation of the mechanical and electrical system design, and then during the document development, watch some of that, and then they monitor it for a year of construction. The school districts in the state of Minnesota require this on all their projects. And the idea is to make sure that you're getting the most efficient electrical and mechanical buildings possible. So commissioning is something that we typically see more and more in our projects. Construction management, if you decided to go construction management approach, and I would say probably 95% of our projects are being done with construction managers these days. And they're just that third party. There's the owner, there's the architect, there's the construction manager, to make sure that the owner's interests are being protected and that you're getting the best supervision and coordination during a project. There's an owner's miscellaneous contingency we typically see for things that might not be in there, just to have a small amount of money for that. Site surveys, if they're required. Again, I mentioned furniture. You know, furniture on a lot of projects, we got a new police city hall project we're planning now, and it's about 4% of the overall construction budget. So if you had, you know, $20 million project, potentially 800,000 is furniture. So it's a real number. It just has to be determined. We find most new projects, you're not moving your old furniture with it. You're a lot of times getting new furniture. It's been hand-me-down long enough. Also in there, well, it's a different lineup, but I'll get into that. Special inspections are another thing that typically the testing of the concrete, the testing of the steel, the testing of things that go into the buildings are not done through the contractor. You want that third-party individual to come and make sure they're being done right. Same thing with geotechnical reports, soil test, interior signage. A lot of times things like interior signage and appliances, you might have some local vendors that provide appliances, microwaves, you know, even monitors and things like this. You're not going to buy that through a contractor. You're going to contract with them directly and have them bring and install appliances. Legal fees, if there's any, moving fees, moving city files and things like that over. Soil remediation, if they required it on the typical site. Soil, the SAC charges that we reference in the state of Minnesota, sometimes, I'm not sure about Willmar, but sometimes there's the soil and water kind of, but again, that's more for a new building. That would apply less on a reuse building or reuse project. Low voltage cabling and AV, we a lot of times see that done separately. Anyway, I'm going through a litany of information. Security systems, sometimes the state plumbing code review is a separate cost that goes straight through the state, but these are kind of a litany of list of things. Out of those 30 items, these are things that we see that are typically in soft costs. So when we say 15 to 20% of a construction cost in a high level and say, here's soft cost, these are the things that are typical. And again, we can give you historic averages on a lot of these as well. So from the construction cost standpoint, and we went through and confirmed this, and we talked to some construction managers we work with, as well as some estimators. And these are more related to the options we showed on there. So the first option, option one at the very top, and I can't zoom into this, but I could talk to it. It dealt with the community center, gutting and remodeling the existing building, building the other building that should have changed. There was a modification to that. New exterior windows, new roofing on the existing building, new walls on the existing building, and some site development work. So again, all those things we see associated with the community center. Roughly about $6 to $7.5, $7.6 million for the construction. To that, we're adding design and construction contingency. So design and construction contingency, when you're doing a high-level project, you haven't selected, like all I said, the light fixtures, the carpet, you haven't selected these. So you leave 5% of design for design contingency to cover those things. As the building goes through those progressions of design stages, that goes down to zero because you're narrowing down how many doors have control access, how many cameras you might have, all those miscellaneous design decisions that haven't been decided. When the project goes out to bid, you want half of that number, so anywhere from $450,000 to about $550,000. You want that for construction contingency, for the what-ifs that come up during construction, and things always do come up. But the goal is that you're really not spending that money as much as at all. We've had a lot of projects, we've had very, very little construction contingency used. So that's, again, it's a budget you allocate and keep it there for during construction. Hopefully, it's not used much. When you look at the total estimated construction for the option one, it's between 7 to 8.7. You add the soft cost item in there, and those are 20%. So you can see the 1.4 to 1.7 for soft cost, and that comes about to 8.4 million to 10.4 million for that, again, remodel and addition to the community center. We added land acquisition, which I think can be taken off. I don't think it has to be required. So there's actually a minor correction on that, which would lower this by 400 and 450,000. At one point, we were looking at purchasing the adjacent property, but we forgot to take that off. So really, instead of looking at that 8.8 to 10.9, really for this particular option, you're looking at the 842 and the 10 million for numbers. And we'll be glad to, I'll issue Leslie a correction to this so you guys have the most correct one. Option 2 below is then the option of building a new City Hall building with Willmar Utility Campus. So you've accommodated your community center up at the existing site by an addition remodeling for that 8.4 to 10.4. But now you're building a new City Hall building, which again is going to be more than a remodeling because you're building an entirely new building. So the construction is roughly about 10.5, 10.6 to 11.3. There's site utility work, which we're assuming would be shared with a utility company of roughly about 1.2 to 1.7, depending upon the site, how much grade is in there, and how much grading needs to be done. And that comes up to that about 11.8 to $13 million. To that, again, you're adding design and construction contingency. And so for the new City Hall to be shared, we have it about the 13 million to 14.6. And to the councilwoman's question about shared chambers and things like this, there's probably about $500,000 to $800,000 that would be less, would be my initial gut sense, is about $500,000, $800,000 if there could be more shared amenities. So it would reduce that some. Because it wouldn't all go away, it would be split with the utility company. So there's some potential savings that could occur that I didn't factor into this.
Wouldn't there
knowing
be,
where that would go.
wouldn't there be less square footage than for what the city hall needs would be? Because you'd take out that space that you had allocated
Yeah,
for
what you
the
do,
chambers.
Councilman, what you do is you take and you still have the square footage, but now you're sharing with each other. So the square footage is there, but you're splitting the cost, right? Because they're going to need a council chamber or meeting space. They're going to need a main lobby space and some public restrooms. That could all be shared.
I was thinking they were going to be two separate buildings.
No.
Okay, they'd be adjoined somehow.
That's the way
Okay.
we're showing it on the plan. We were showing it, because if they're two separate buildings, there's almost no benefit whatsoever. The city hall could build anywhere. So if you're going to build it there, try to take advantage of it being a shared campus, is what we would recommend.
I was under the impression, I got the shared campus piece, but that there was a desire to have two separate. And so maybe if they had built the chambers, then we just have to walk on the sidewalk to that building.
That is an opportunity as well. That is, and that's something to be explored. You could have it to where they say, okay, you're going to build that meeting room, that large meeting room, we're going to use it when we need it. That's an opportunity as well, and that would even reduce the cost even more.
Right.
Yeah, that is definitely an opportunity. And then on top of that, we did have land acquisition cost, and we, again, based on the information that we were told is about potential acreage cost and the amount of acres and, what would make sense for City Hall. And so we're showing anywhere from about 800,000 to about $1 million for land acquisition. So what we're showing here is about 18 million to 20 million, a little over, for what we're considering a new City Hall. But again, there's potential savings in that as well. The next, and I apologize, some of these are difficult to read up on the screen, and hopefully your packet works for you. The one up in the left-hand corner is really taking option 1 and 2 and combining them together. So it's to make sure you always have an apples-to-apples comparison. It's saying, okay, you're expanding your community center, you're remodeling your community center, and you're building a new City Hall with the utility company. Because you're looking at that compared to like JCPenney and what are those costs. So what we did, and again, there's a slight error in math with the property cost, which would lower this slightly. But you're looking at about 20 million to 23 million. Again, if you take 400,000 out there, you're roughly, for the land cost that we had identified, you're roughly at that 19.5 or so. So that would go down to, yeah, about 19.5 to about 22.5, somewhere in there. About the $3 million difference for combining those. And that adds all that together. The soft costs are identified for each project. And again, if you drop it down, so you're about 24.5 or 24.8 to about 28.7, modifying the numbers slightly on the property that I left in there, for the remodeled and expanded community center and the new city hall. So shared with the community, the Willmar utilities. So again, you've got this 24.8, which would be on that top left roughly, and I'm adjusting the numbers slightly, and then 24.8 to 28.7 for that combined. So that's kind of the number to think of if you were to go with community center remodeling expansion and a new city hall. The J.C. Penney site below that. So again, what we did is working with our engineers and some of our estimators, we looked at potential costs for some of this. And, we're figuring there's some gutting. There's not a lot of gutting, but there's the beauty shop that's in there. There's some various things. There's some plumbing that we know are going to have to be cut out. So there's some costs for gut and demo of some interior spaces. There's some remodeling, and these are high level at this preliminary stage. We know that the mechanical and plumbing system's got to be totally redone. The rooftop units are on there, again, 40-some years old. We know the mechanical systems have got to be redone. We're assuming that once you locate where the public and the staff restrooms need to be within that building, we're going to be tearing up slabs, we're going to be locating new plumbing. So we're figuring you want this to be as new as possible and have as few headaches as possible. So we're figuring at a high level that we're redoing a lot of that work. Cutting into the windows is not inexpensive. Those are 8-inch thick concrete panels. You can only go to a certain edge distance. The structural integrity of those 8-foot wide panels, you have to stay away from the edges roughly 16 to 18 inches. So, when you get that 8-foot panel and you take 3 feet away, it means you get about a 5-foot window centered in the panel, keeping the structural integrity of some of those panels. So there's only so much you can do, but those are cutting in potential windows and that. And again, we know that roof system that's up there is old, is outdated. So the idea of putting a new most ballasted roof, which is a rock, and that was discussed previously. The structure was designed for it. It's going to accommodate it. There's no issues with the structure. Again, there was some question about the J.C. Penney building. It's not going anywhere. That's going to outlive most of us, unless somebody comes along and bulldozes it because nobody moves into it at some point in time. It's going to be there. It's got solid precast walls. It's got a solid steel assembly. It's going to be there. It just needs the roof assembly to be redone so it doesn't continue to have leaks and problems. And it will need to meet Minnesota energy codes with the envelope changes as well. Once you change that much remodeling on a building, you're required to meet current energy codes and things like that. So we've accounted for that in the cost estimate. We've allowed for some soft cost or some site development work, again, the paving, the utilities, not really utilities as much, it's really the paving around the site and the reworking of that and some of the landscape, what that entails. Design and construction contingency, we talked about what that's in that. The soft costs, we're coming up with basically a construction cost of about $13.7 to $7.3 for the building and the things we've identified. And I think that did include, no, that doesn't include the addition. It's trying to keep the apples to apples, actually this estimate, to keep it to some of the information you've seen before, we did not include the 8,000 square foot addition we added on that. That would be an additional 3,000. It's down at the bottom where we show it. So basically we left it out just so you could compare some of the other information you've been given, apples to apples. Soft cost for this is basically 2.7 to 3.4. Again, it's to be determined, but it's allowance for those things we discussed. We're assuming that if the city were to purchase this directly, I mean, one option I would think would be the city could purchase this facility directly and go through your own process and designing and bidding the project. So we're showing the potential of purchasing that J.C. Penney building at what we understand might be the list, and they asked for that property of basically $1.4 to $1.7 million. As an option, we're showing that 8,000 square foot addition and what that would do to the overall cost. So if you add that 8,000 square foot addition, your project's roughly about 20.8 to 25.7 for the project.
And what
Now-
was it without the 8,000 square feet?
The bottom number, Councilman, is the correct number.
And what is that?
That number is the one that shows that 20.8 million to 25.7 million.
Okay.
And that's with the addition. So if you back that out, so if you backed out roughly the 3, you're at 7, and I think I've got it on the following page too, you're roughly about 7.8 to 22.7 without that 3,000 square foot, or with that 8,000 square foot addition, which is roughly about 3,000 or $3 million.
I just wanted it to be spelled out for the listeners.
Glad to help.
Thanks.
There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
There's so much that's put out there, and believe me, I'd be glad to make sure we help clarify wherever we can. We're getting confused sometimes, too. The last one on the right, upper right, that column really was to build the brand-new City Hall, brand-new community center, everything new. And that shows roughly a construction total of about 26 to about 29 million. And with soft cost and whatnot, and that's assuming you're not buying property, that's assuming you're building on some property you have. It's about 31 to 34. So when you compare that to what you're looking at with, like JCPenney, just for comparison, and assuming you don't do the I'd have to add the 8,000 square foot addition, because this one does have the 8,000 square foot addition. So if you were comparing numbers, the JCPenney is about 20.8 compared to 31. Or 25.7 for JCPenney compared to about 34. So you're looking at about roughly this, $11 million plus or minus $11 to $9 million difference between brand new for everything, something like that. Procurement methods. So for procurement methods, it comes down to really how you want to design and construct the building. So one is this kind of build to suit, where you work through the proposal that's been presented to you through Willmar 10, where they basically build the building and you purchase the building from. And we tried to put the numbers together based on what we saw and what we understand, and what we've done through our estimates as well, based on the information that was provided to the council. So, and their proposal was about 18.2 million to about 20.7 million. That did not include, there was a note, an asterisk on there that said it did not include some soft costs. Well, those soft costs that were excluded were furniture and AV systems. Furniture and AV systems for a project like this are right in that, again, assuming you're doing new, are about in that 700 to 900,000 range. So what we did is we added to that build-to-suit option, we added the idea of purchasing the property, which we're assuming you would have to purchase the property at some point in time. So purchasing the property, which brings it to 19.7 to 22.4. And then the items that were excluded that were in our estimate, again, trying to make sure it's apples to apples as much as possible, then that brings it, rough estimates that were shown out there, about the 20.4 million to 23.3 million. So that's what we understand has been presented. And that's a method you could go through, purchasing it through Willmar 10, having them build it, the city buys the project back. The design bid build process. Yes, sir.
You probably weren't aware. You maybe weren't made aware of that, but the 1.7 is already in our 20,705,000.
Oh,
So-
it wasn't identified in any of the numbers. That's why I guess we didn't know.
Yeah, so the 23,305 number in the middle of your sheet, you'd have to reduce that by 1.7. And then you're right, the 900, because we didn't have the AV and the furniture.
So that puts it closer, definitely puts it closer to what we're showing. Yep. Because that would then lower that 20, thank you, appreciate that clarity. Yeah, we didn't see it in the initial, otherwise we would have taken that off. And again, what we can issue this and with our amendment to it too. So then the build to suit option that we're showing out there, the 20.4, if you deduct the 1.5 million, now you're roughly 18.9 million to roughly in the 1.7. So now you're at 21.6, I think.
21.6.
Yeah, so now you're at 18.9 to 21.6 plus or minus, again, just to make sure it's apples to apples. Now, our estimate is not too far off there, really. So our estimate, again, what we're proposing is a design bid build process where the city has a lot of engagement in the process and the design process. The council's involved in all the updates, the budget, and schedule. You're hiring a firm that does, whether it's us or somebody else, that does city halls and community center planning and understands these types of facilities. You have an open book competitive bidding process, so when this project goes out on the streets, it's competitively bid to multiple contractors. And then that estimate, based on the information we've shown, it's about, and I'm going to round it up a little bit, about 18 million to 22. 18 million to 22. So if you're comparing numbers, and again, we're not bidding each other. These are real high budget numbers. Nobody's given a lot of detail at this point because I don't think anybody knows the exact detail. The design has been developed. But I think you're really comparing, ours comes down about that 18 to 22.5. And at this point, I think the purpose of this slide was to say, what method does the city want to go through? If the JCPenney is the right site, how do you want to go through the execution of the project? It's more the critical comment. I've gone through this a lot quicker than I thought I'd go through it, so maybe I should just stall for a little while. No, I'm just kidding. So I think this comes down to and it's, you know, it's interesting. Very few councils have this opportunity to weigh in on these big decisions like this for where your city is going to go. And this isn't the next 10 years. This is the next 50 to 80 years. I mean, clearly, wherever you go, you're going to stay there for quite a long time. And so it's the question of where's the right place for the city hall to be? You know, is it important for it to be a downtown and a core function and show that downtown? I mean, clearly that's not necessarily always the case because the county, and you see a lot of counties that run out of space in a city core, and they do exactly what Candy Ojai did. They move out to an outside area where they have more room to grow and expand, and there's some benefits to that as well. You know, community center, I think, clearly has got a name. It's where it works best for you. It's been at one location for many, many years. Does it have to be there? That's totally an issue that the council needs to wrestle with a little bit. And then the budget. You know, at the end of the day, I think we've shown you a lot of numbers. The one thing I can guarantee you, it's going to fall within these ranges pretty well. And at some point in time, the council is going to look at what your bond capacity has been. I think with Baker Tilly's discussed some of this, you know, and where you want to be, what funds you currently have. I think some money for the community center out there, what you want to do for this amenity for the community, as well as space that's needed for the city council and for the city staff, and determine what budget makes the most sense. But I think where it needs to be, the budget you're good with, and then again, depending upon what you go with, potential procurement process. Is there benefits to going from one versus the other and how that might be?
Well, you did a great job there, Bruce.
Thank you, sir.
You had your right-hand man there.
Paul normally speaks a
support.
lot, so he just let me go tonight.
I don't know if there's any questions from the council. So, okay, Audrey.
Thank you. The remodeling the community center where it's at, I'm really surprised at how much space from what they have to what they are requesting, I think, with that. Is there a way to remodel that building and build City Hall if we didn't add on to the community center? Could City Hall be built on the location where you had the blue?
Yeah, let me go back to that for 1 second and look. Am I correct that the property line on the east side is right at the edge of the building, or does it go further to the east?
It goes further east. That lot is ours.
You know what I'd be, more, I think you have to go back with Brett and her team and say what works, you know, what do you need, what's more, and we know that the wood shop is out of space. We saw that. We talked to many people. We saw that. I think there's some incremental growth. Could it just grow a little bit further to the south? And could you do the city hall? That's a potential. If this is a site you really want to go to, I know it adds cost, but, you know, would you build the new community center kind of where we're showing that blue box or somewhere in that range, and then tear down the existing community center and build a new city hall? That's an option on this site as well, is to build the community center so that nobody's without their community center space, build it, and then where the existing footprint is. No, the only reason I'm a little inclined to that is because then it puts the identity of the city hall, so people in the community can see it from 71, and doesn't tuck it back and hide it. So now it's clearly known as a city facility. You can see it off 71. 71 is your primary movement through there. So I think there's some things that could be done on this site and make it work a little bit better. Will it be as less, cost-wise is a little different, of course, than, because now you're tearing down a building. So the reality is you're getting closer to that larger number even on this site.
But we own the land.
You do.
With that. I have a concern about operational costs. We have not looked at the community center operational costs, and we're still dealing with having to change our budget for the buildings that we built with the local option sales tax, because there was no operational money set aside in that. And so I can't imagine building on to the JCPenney building site. That doesn't make any sense to me. And from a parking standpoint, I've expressed my concerns about parking there, but I also just am concerned about the mall in general. There's conversations going on in this community about, the whole thing being torn down and making it a whiteboard and starting over. And I'm not sure we would benefit by being there. And it's the backside of the mall. That's how I see it. So I just have a concern in general about investing that much money into a building that is that old with that. And that's me. And, I just think we need to get our arms around what it is we want and how much space we actually need or can afford and to do that. And so those are not things that relate to these numbers. They're things that we have to figure out internally with our staff with that, so.
Normally, we don't let the audience talk, but Bill, you can
Audrey, where are you getting this information about the?
get the microphone, Bill.
I'm Bill Patterson, I'm a resident of Willmar. Where are you getting this information about the Candy Mall or the Uptown Willmar Mall being torn down?
I had someone ask me that question. I'm not going to tell you who it was, and suggest that the city should buy the whole mall. What's going to happen with the rest of the mall?
This isn't attached to the mall.
It is attached to the mall.
It's a separate building.
No, it is attached to the mall. There isn't, it's attached. And we would need, with that. And so I don't want to argue with that, but those conversations are going on. When you want what's best for the community, long-term, I don't know what that is for the mall right now. And I know there's some patching going on there, but we take complaints, and, with that, it'd be great to go back to the Herbergers and JCPenney timeframes, to have those stores again. But for us just to be there, to use a building when we have no clue what the rest of what's going to happen, I struggle with that.
So just clarification, it's attached to the mall, but it's a separate building and it's parceled off, right? Are the rest of the mall buildings or stores, are they parceled off yet, or are they all combined?
Some are.
Some are.
So just to kind of, I am Tim Jackson, General Manager of the mall, and I work for Roxton. Okay, so there are rumors, but they're just rumors, just like any other rumors you hear, and any other incorrect information you get throughout Willmar. We all know that to be true. Your issue about being on the backside of the mall, if you're looking at the infrastructure, you have Bremer Bank, you have Cashwise Foods, you have Aldi, and you have Walmart, all on Fifth Street. So that traffic is almost as heavy as First Street is with the things that are going through there. This is someone who's there on the location that sees it.
I live in that in that neighborhood. I drive it regularly.
We got to remember, the city council approved the parceling off of the mall. We just did that in the last year. We did it for Skylark too, so. We know something's gonna happen, we just don't know what yet, so. Any other questions? Mr. Beam?
See, I'm going to just make one quick comment
Here,
about
get the microphone.
And you can check the county records, the county courthouse records. When the mall was transferred here, Dion, 4 or 5 years ago? 2015. Okay. The debt against the mall was pretty minimal in relationship to the purchase price. They brought in outside investors, this was quoted in the Tribune. And the current debt has been paid down some because of the sale of several pieces of property. The AutoZone, the old, what's the old building? Pizza Hut, yeah. Before that it was, oh no, I guess the other one was Hardee's, wasn't it? Yeah. So anyway, the debt is not as big a problem as some people think it is. I'm not saying that it couldn't close, they could file bankruptcy or whatever, but the debt against the building, you can go to the courthouse and find out what it originally was. And it was not a typical maximum loan like you see on a lot of commercial projects. So, thank you.
If-
Audrey?
I just want to clarify, our job here at the council table is to pick the best location for City Hall, first of all, in my mind, and the community center had been brought along with that. That's our job. So, I don't want the demise of the mall. I want what's best for the mall. I just don't think that us being there is critical to the future, and for me, it's not the best location for City Hall. And I think that's our job. And it's been hard because there's a lot of strong business people that are involved with that, and that's great. But it's still our job to figure out. I still support, we haven't taken care of the city auditorium. We've made some mistakes in the past, and we now have an opportunity to do something right for our community for the next 50 years or longer. That's our job. So I'm sorry if I don't believe that this is a rescue, or I don't see it as a rescue. For me, it's a decision of where's the best location. And so that's where I'm at.
We're just trying to give you proper information.
And I appreciate that. And, we're trying to get proper information, and now we have to figure out, can we afford the square footage that we're talking about? There's a lot of different figures that came through tonight. Is this the right time for bonding, those types of things? We've got our work to do, and we need accurate information, and hopefully that's what we're getting. That's where we're at. That's where I'm at.
And we did look, Councilman, if I could, we did look at initially the option of, do you just build a community center there and build the city hall somewhere else? But the reality is, at a 52,000 square foot building and the 30,000, you'd be left with a little less than half square footage not needed. So it really makes no sense to acquire the whole thing unless you were going to really go everything there. But we understand. And the viability of malls is a question across the country, I think.
So we're missing 2 members tonight and the mayor. So what is your suggestion that we do? Have another workshop in the near future so we
Yep.
can analyze all these figures? And one option is we have to get a hard number of what it would cost to buy JCPenney building outright.
Yep,
Be up to you or Kyle to do that?
we will do that.
Yeah.
But I think that, what it comes down to is we can't get any we have to have a site. And in that, it's the long-range idea of where is the best site possible. Now, of course, I understand, everybody wants us out at the JCPenney site because they think it's central. But in the future of the city, we're growing to the north. And if we look further out than just 1 or 2 years, that north side is really, I'd say, where our community is going to be going. We have a lot of open property over there that's going to be developed at some point in time. There's also the National Guard is also in communication with us. They are planning on leaving that area, and they have asked the city if they're interested. So that just gives us then that whole corridor in the future. Right now it wouldn't be completely, but in the future, the city can have a comprehensive plan for that whole corridor and have a plan in place as to, okay, if this property comes up, then the city should continue to expand or buy that property. So then it becomes a whole governmental corridor. And with the acquiring of the National Guard property, that just would really give our Public Works Department more space. It has 3 mechanical bays. It has offices like crazy. It has the future of a lot of things that the city is looking for. And I can't say when, but this is what the National Guard is planning, and this is what they're asking of us too. So that is in the works. And so it's just a matter of the city deciding on a site, give us a budget, and we will work within that budget to try to come up with the best design for the city hall, community center, if that's the case. In this also, you got to remember that if we buy JCPenney, what do we do with 2 other sites and the auditorium? We have then 3, we still have 3 sites that we're still going to have power to, we're still going to have to maintain, we're still going to have to continue operations, or not necessarily operations, but we're going to have to continue maintaining those buildings until we decide what to do with them. And so I'm not, when we started this process back in 2021, the idea of bringing on the architect and helping us with site selection was we were only looking at city properties. We were not looking anywhere else because it just makes sense to use the city properties we have. We have a lot of city property that we could use. And I think in our first presentation back in November from BKV Group, we had 5 different parcels that we could look at. And then of that then came the idea we should then look back again to the community center, city hall site out at the community center site, because that was the original past approval that the council had given. They had given the nod to that site. So then we had that looked at again, and that's why where we're at now.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
Well, I just don't know if we were going to weigh in tonight, or we're just
No.
going to save this for.
Yeah.
I mean, Audrey voiced her opinion of her feelings about different sites. So I'm just thinking, are we going to even that
Just
out? We're just going to
take
let
it.
that sit?
Take it in as information and,
Go ahead and say what you want, Julie.
Well, I think being centrally located in the city is an ideal location. I think it's more accessible to people. I think the square footage of that space is adequate. One of the things we haven't discussed or looked at is some of the city halls and community centers that we looked at throughout the state in the past 3 years, some of them have a shared space, like where the dances would be for the community center, and that's the same space where the city council has their chambers and meets. And then the dais and the area where the council people are can be closed off, and then that's opened up, and it's a community center in the space where the chairs would be. So I think the space is adequate. I think, again, the cost savings is very appealing to me. If, again, we have work to do with the auditorium. So if we were talking the 30 to 35, 34 million range for a brand-new facility out at the present community center site, you go down to 20 million for the JCPenney site. If you were thinking we were going to bond or had 30 million, then we would maybe have a couple of million that we could put towards whatever our idea is for the auditorium, instead of putting it all into a brand-new site. If we're looking at how we can best spend the taxpayers' money, I also think the location, there's just a lot of people that I talk to that don't even know now where the community center is. And even though it's on a main thoroughfare coming in and out of town, whether that's a signage issue, I don't know. But being in the center of town, it's just more accessible. I see the use just increasing, and I just see it as being easier for people to get to instead of driving out north of town. And I would say there's growth on the south side of town as well. We got the new CAP building, we got other businesses and things going south. I mean, I think we're growing all over. We're growing to the west, out in Industrial Park. We are in a very, very fortunate position in our community. And I'm an advocate, and I like the cost and the location of the JCPenney's location.
Kyle?
Thank you, Councilmember. This is just purely for information for the council at this point, and this is not not trying to sway in any direction by any means. During the RFP process for the lead abatement or lead dust remediation and asbestos abatement proposal that is currently out for the city auditorium, that walkthrough was just done last Monday morning. We had discovered some information during that walkthrough with 4 different contractors that during that process, if the council elects to move forward with the lead dust remediation and asbestos removal, that the electrical system also needs to be removed. It is the amount of mercury that is powered or is in that system would not be able to remain in the building. So I guess what piqued my interest is if we're looking at the best way to capitalize on the best interest of saving money, this would be by far the most expensive option, I think, if City Hall stayed at its current location. But the city may have an opportunity to take care of 2 older buildings while constructing a new one on that site. Purely informational at this point, but and we just found that information out last Monday, and we are still collecting information. We do not know how much it would cost to put in a new system. Nor does the council need to accept those proposals and move forward with that at this time. So I just wanted to make that clear as well. If we do the abatement route, the building would end up powerless.
Thanks for that information. You know, Mayor Kelvin had talked about donating it as a museum to Mr. Lindstrom, Candia High. And I don't know, is anyone still working on looking at getting that as a designated museum?
In its current state, I don't know if we could give it away or donate it. I think, from my understanding, we need to abate all of the lead dust. That does not include, in our proposal, we are not moving forward with any lead dust remediation of light fixtures, windows. That would all have to come at a later date as well. Right now, we're just doing surface cleaning in the proposal. So again, this is not tied to City Hall. I don't want to get too far off of that. But just for the discussion of that potential site and which would result in the demolition of the current building and the auditorium, one thing that is happening is the removal of the power of that building if we move forward. So I just want to put that out there. We do not have any final information yet, and we're still collecting that. Bids are due on that project on the 26th. So we'll know more at the end of the month.
Julie?
Don't you wonder what people do with the old churches and all these other older buildings in all the other communities? And is it just because we're dealing with the lead and that it continued to be a gun range?
I believe it is, the gun range is a large factor of it, and that is where most of the lead dust is, for obvious reasons, but it is, the entire building was tested in lead. I don't believe any, I'd have to look back through the report there, but there may have been only 1 or 2 rooms that would have met the new standards that are put out. It's a very, the standards of lead dust that can remain on site is 10 parts per million, I believe. I could be wrong, but the report is in a previous council packet. So those standards have increased in the last maybe 3 years, or for sure since the last time the building was cleaned. And like we had talked about donating, but we tried to do that with the gun range equipment. And I'll get off, I'll be done after this. I'm getting sidetracked, I apologize, since this is purely a discussion on City Hall. But again, just from donating or giving things away, we need to clean, or it needs to be cleaned by someone else before we can officially give it away. And that was just from our discussion on the gun range items only. And I'll stop there.
Okay. Audrey, do you want to say something?
Yeah, Julie made the comment, I think, about doing the right thing for the taxpayers and those types of things. And so I still hope that we will look at the utilities as a way to create some efficiencies. They're both owned by the city, and we have a responsibility. And so I still think there's an opportunity for City Hall to be looking at that location also. And so I just think that we've got work to do, so.
Anyone on this side? Mike?
No, just what Kyle brought up. We've talked about this numerous times, and I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail, but we've talked about giving this over to the veterans for a long time. And the Veterans Administration still, I think, is a key to getting some help with this building, to get it back to John. Because you can't keep removing that stuff and bring it back and removing it and bring it back. It's not going to last. And it'd be a shame to lose that. And I have talked to the VA in the past about this, and they have been interested. And I don't know where we're at with it, but I just, again, it's down a rabbit trail. We're not talking about City Hall.
I'd be happy to talk about it at another meeting.
Yep.
Carl, any comment?
I'd just echo what both Julie and Audrey have said, that we need to make sure we're doing the responsible thing and looking at long-term costs. Is it best to go cheapest with renovating, or is it better to spend a little more money up front and have new building that may cost less as we move forward? And I quite honestly don't know where I'm at. We need to talk more.
Vicki?
Well, I think both Audrey and Julie have good points. However, I feel like what Carl said, the cheaper option, I don't know if this is what you said, but this is what I'm saying. The cheaper option might not be the best option. It might be cheaper up front, but in the long run could end up costing us more because we don't know how the mall is going to fare. And currently, I'm not seeing any steps toward it getting improved. I'm not seeing a lot of movement of stores coming in. I don't think we should expect the city to fix the mall. I think that feels like a big gamble to me, and as a council member, I am not willing to gamble for something. I don't know how it's going to turn out.
Okay. As for me, I thought the community center should have been in the mall back in 92 when they were looking for a location, but then the Eagles building, or the Elks building came up, so they bought that. But I still like the mall area, the neighborhood, convenience for the school-aged children and senior citizens. So just depends if we buy it outright, what the price is gonna be, or if we go your route, everything included, so. But I do want at least City Hall with community center or City Hall with utilities. I want at least two properties together so you can have some savings, so it only makes sense. So. With that, any other comments? Motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Adjourn.